Alright, welcome back YouTube. It's been week number 2 since we did the first video, which was the starter replacement and also the oil change. I ended up taking the starter back, got some money back, and we got the water pump, which I'm going to do today. This is the brand new water pump gasket. We also have the housing for the thermostat, which is metal. The other one is plastic, and I'm not really sure why Dodge went that way. And we have the thermostat. So this time I'll be showing you how to drain it properly, how to fill it back in, how to set everything, how to screw everything down so that way you don't have any more leaks. So the first thing we're actually going to do is we're going to take where the reservoir is and we're going to open this up. We're going to open this up so when we're draining down at the petcock, there we go, oh there it goes. So when we're draining down at the petcock, air can get to the top, it could drain a lot faster. Now what we're going to do is we're going to raise the car up. I'm going to show you where the petcock is. We're going to loosen it, drain all the coolant, tighten it back up. So now that we have our car lifted, here is the old cover. We're going to be taking that off to make a lot of room so we can get in there and work. These I believe are going to be 8mm. There's 4 of them. We're going to take this cover off. Now on the passenger side on this vehicle, which is a 2013 Dodge Challenger, the petcock is going to be on the passenger side right, I don't know if you can see it, try to point to it better, but it's going to be right about there, connected to this tube, which is just going to flush all the radiator coolant down once we open it up. Now if you're just going to drain the coolant a little bit and you're going to save it, you're doing a thermostat, you're only going to get a little bit, use a clean bucket. But since we're going to be using brand new coolant, we're not going to save it, we're going to put in just a random bucket, we're going to drain all of it out. This specific model takes about 11 quarts of antifreeze. We have 12, so we're going to be just shy of 1. So I'll get that started right now. So now that we've removed the top cover, which actually, my mistake, it was 10mm all around. You can see a better version. There it is. You can probably see a little bit better. The petcock right there. I already loosened it a little bit, and that's going to start flowing down. Have like a very thin bucket because we're going to be leaving this under here once this is all drained, because more of the fluid is going to come out when we take the water pump out. So I'm going to crack that open a little bit more, start draining it. So once you remove the petcock there, all of it will drain out. It'll make quite a bit of a mess, so just be prepared for that. I actually had to take my hole out because for some reason it didn't want to drain efficiently, and we'll plug this back in after it's done dripping and head back down and start it on the inside. So now that we got that petcock back in, which was actually a real pain in the butt, but back in, we left the bottom cover off and I left the tray underneath there because once we pull the water pump off, more of the fluid is going to go in there. Better catch it. So allow me to shed some light on the situation. Yes, I know that wasn't very clever. We're going to be taking this off, which just pops right off. We're going to be taking off, I know the standard comes with its own stock intake. I have the Mopar one, so I'll be removing it with 2 8mm, 8mm, and another 8mm in there. Remove all that so we can get to the housing, thermostat, and the water pump. And we'll also have to be taking off the serpentine belt. So I'll get that done like this. Whoa, and just like that, it's off. Forgot to mention, when you're taking this off, down here, there's an 8mm bolt that slides into this little quarter panel here. And there's a sensor here, or I believe throttle body or maps, something like that, that goes into the air intake. So you have to remove those 2 things first. But now, we have all this room to get to what we want to do. So, since we drained the coolant out first, I will be removing this hose with this clamp, which holds on to the thermostat and the housing that we're also going to be replacing, which is all underneath the water pump we're also going to be replacing. So we're going to remove this clamp using with pliers, a pair of these, slide this all the way back. We're going to, I like to clamp these off with these special little water clamp pliers, which come in very handy. We're going to take that off first, and we're going to get to this. So once you get this clamp all the way down, what I usually like to do also, just to make this a lot simpler, is break the seal on this using a pair of pliers. I'll try to do this one-handed, but basically you just want to put this over and you start wiggling it back and forth until you hear it snap like that. That's how you know you break the seal. Now you can slowly pull this right off. Out with a little bit of grip, it's out. So now that we got the hose off, thermostat is going to be 2 bolts, one up top, one underneath, 10 millimeter. We're going to crack those open and take the thermostat out. Once you remove the 2 bolts, just give this a little bit of wiggle and it should just come right out. Just like that, seal and there's that. We'll be replacing that. Next, we're going to do this housing, which we have the metal one. I don't know why Dodge once again went plastic, but these are all 10 millimeter bolts. But before we do that, we're going to do the same thing as the big radiator hose that was up here. We're going to remove that one, bring it down, and take this off. Any one of these that you break the seal on, generally speaking, I like to remove these completely, these little hose clamps, and put on new hose clamps. Anything that hasn't been broken, like this one that I'm not going to touch, you leave it alone because the seal's still good. So we'll remove this hose and we'll get this off. So as I'm pulling off the housing, you notice that some bolts are a little bit longer than others. So what I usually like to do, and I'll do this exact same thing for the water pump, is if they're not all the same size, you want to make sure that they go back exactly where they were. So what I did is I pulled them out just a little bit, holding on by one thread. I'm going to tap this out very, very slowly, and I'm going to make sure that once all of them come out in the same holes, I will then go and transfer all these bolts onto the other housing. Alright, so we pulled out the housing. We have the new one, the old one. So now we're just going to transfer all these bolts onto this one so we know exactly where to put them on. I want to also make sure that the gasket's about the same. That's the old one. So 3, 2, 1. And as you can see, now all the bolts that used to be on the old one are exactly in the same one. So you know when we put it back, all the bolts line up. There's not one too short or one too big in the housing. So our next thing I'm going to do is all this pink gunk that comes from the radiator when it leaks all the radiator fluid. I'm going to get all this cleaned up. I'm going to take the serpentine belt off. I'm going to draw a little diagram. And down here at the tensioner, there's a little square for a drive you put in to loosen the belt. So I'll take the belt off right now, draw a diagram, and we'll get that started. So we got the belt off. Anytime we get the belt off, you just bend it. And you can see that this one's pretty good. No cracks in it, so we'll be reusing the belt. As for there, you can get a 3/8 drive into this tensioner, and as you can see, you pull up on it and it'll give you just enough leeway to get the belt off. We drew a diagram here of how the belt will go back on. And we're going to take off this water pump. There's going to be 2 hoses down here on the bottom we also have to remove. And then it looks like all of these are going to be 10 millimeter. These look like 12 or 13 millimeters. And then we have one big one. We'll also be having to remove this idler to get that out of the way so we can pull the water pump out. And then I'll show you guys how to clean the backside of it and install the new one. So we got to all the bolts of the water pump. Had to take off the idler. So the idler, which was down here, idler was a 13. This one is a 13. This one is a 16, and the rest of them are all 10s. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap it with the hammer a little bit. It's going to come right out. Antifreeze will probably pour out, and then I'm going to transfer the bolts using the same method we used before from this water pump to the new water pump. Alright, so I got all the bolts back in. As I was doing it, I realized that one of the bolts was missing. So I had to replace it with another one. And the last people who did this was Dodge when they replaced my water pump when I got my car about 20,000 miles when it had on it. So that's unfortunate. As a part of everything else, I'm gonna put this all back together. Basically all I'm gonna do now is clean up all this extra gunk around here, and I'm just gonna put the gaskets back in. One thing I will say, the gasket that comes with the new one, you want to make sure that it comes out with this outer. You see how it comes out outer? Do not put this on backwards, otherwise you'll have problems. So that little bulge goes on the back of that one, which seeds in the car. One last thing I forgot to mention, I'm going to be using this little grind wheel to clean up all this extra gunk. I know some people use wire brushes. Before you do this, or you use a wire brush or you use a tool like this, make sure that all the holes that go in the pump and anywhere else are plugged up, so when you're cleaning, all this debris doesn't get inside your engine. So once you get it all cleaned up, both sections, what you want to do is grab a bucket of water and spray everything, hose down everything that antifreeze touches. As antifreeze ever gets on any electrical components, get really hot, it'll start to burn. So just wash it all off. Once you're done, don't forget to pull out your little hole pluggers that you put in. You don't want the water pump to get stuck with that. So I got the water pump in, but there's a couple key points I want to make. With these new hoses, what we're gonna do, because we're putting new hose clamps on, I don't do the old ones. Once you break the seal, I feel like that's it. What we're gonna do is we're gonna clean them out with a rag, and then before we put them on and we put the new coupler on there, we're gonna use this. It's called gasket tack, and that'll prevent your hoses from leaking. It'll make a nice seal. Always do this, and that way you'll never have any more leaks coming from hoses or whatnot. Okay, so we got pretty much everything back on. We star patterned all the bolts, all the gaskets seated perfectly. Replaced all the clamps with these new ones. Put the purple gasket sealant on. I put the tube on with the sensor right there because I'm going to start it. Because one thing I want to tell you guys about these cars is certain cars, when you're adding the antifreeze in, they have near the thermostat that we installed a burp valve. And what you do is you unscrew this, not all the way, but close up top, and you start pouring in antifreeze. And the second you see antifreeze coming out of here, you close it, and that's how you bleed the system in terms of antifreeze. Now, as we come to the conclusion, we checked everywhere, nothing's leaking, everything's running good. We burped the system, now we're just waiting for it to go down by running it, making sure that temperature gauge stays at a half, and that's about it. We'll put everything back together, and that's how you do a water pump.